All right. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Yarmouth Finance Committee is being conducted via remote participation. All votes during this meeting will need to be conducted by roll call. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in proceedings as provided for in the order. Public participation will be permitted by allowing members of the public to join this meeting via Zoom. And Mr. Chairman, if you could just take a roll call for quorum to enter into the meeting.
Great, thanks. Robert.
Here.
Jack.
Here.
Nate.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
George.
Here.
Stephanie.
Here.
I believe that is it. Moving on to the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to read those? Take that as a yes. Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to accept?
Motion to accept as submitted.
This is George. I guess I'm gonna be a jerk here, but there are several things that I think need clarification. If, Dan told us that this is our record, and I think it's necessary that we make it as clear as possible. I'll give an example. The first item I have here is there's a discussion about what I think Patricia Armstrong had related to us. And the first statement that is not clear, it said that golf opened early. Well, it didn't open early. It didn't open until June. So I'm just saying that I think it's incumbent upon us, not upon Beverly. This is not anything that I'm saying against Beverly. Her job is to do the best she can to transcribe the meeting. Our job is to make it as clear as it should be to us who participated. And to merely just take them and accept them leaves the public without a clear record of what we've done.
Do you have some changes that you'd like to make there, just aside from?
Several clarifications. For example, in the next line, there's something about they were busy with the river opening. What was the river opening? There's a discussion of planks referred to residents for the Bray Farm Boardwalk. We also talked about the Bass Hole Boardwalk. I don't know what SHIN means, having to do with the
Shine.
the senior center. So I don't know what that means. Someone said shine. I don't know what that means. I'm just saying it's incumbent upon us to make this clear. Not Beverly does the work of transcribing. It's our job to render these minutes to be clear so that the public can understand what we've done.
I then suggest, I think Dan said we could do this at one point in the past, that we postpone the meeting, approving the minutes until our next meeting, and then George can send his changes to Beverly.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think in this particular case though, Sarah, there are some things that are unclear to me and I don't have any recollection what they mean.
Okay.
So it's incumbent upon the committee to make those in, but I'm happy to submit my, these things to Beverly. It's just, we need to be a little bit more diligent about that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I understand. Meeting minutes are incredibly important.
So do we can postpone the acceptance of the minutes if you want to send something to Beverly, George, that's fine.
I'll be glad to.
Yeah, but I want to also just agree with George that, he's right. It is our responsibility to do more than look at it 5 minutes beforehand, which I'll be honest, that's what I did. So George, I will commit to looking at them a little bit more in advance and taking a look at and trying to provide some feedback to Beverly as well. And to whatever degree we can get them a little bit sooner, I think that would also help. Just because sometimes if it's, a day ahead of time, I just don't have the capacity for that. But I think George is right. Also, as it relates to the conversation about the metrics, I feel like it's still not really clear. Like that before we decide on metrics, we all want to train like a really clear training on what those are. And then we'll go decide from them. It's not just sort of like, an addendum to it. It's a really critical piece to us deciding what metrics we want.
I would say this, that I asked the question of Dan, and I got a response that there is no alternative way of providing a recording or some document of what we have done. So if we can't expect there to be a video or some vocal transcript, then, you know, we're stuck with this procedure. And so Dan said this is the way it has to go. I'm blaming you, Dan.
I don't,
Dan,
I'm sorry I got late. I had some user problems over here in town hall. What's the question?
Just about the minutes. You had asserted 2 meetings ago that the minutes are legal record.
Yes.
Of our meeting. There's no other way to, get around that. So we have to take the responsibility of making these things as clear as possible.
That's correct.
There's some questions about some things that aren't quite right in the minutes, but I would throw it out there that it's a tremendous amount of information that we go over in an hour and a half, and I don't think it's ever going to be accurate, and I'm not sure anybody on this committee is going to remember exactly what was said. So I don't know how we, the minutes are trying to transcribe as best as possible what goes on in the meeting. I don't think getting it right or 100% is even feasible.
It's,
someone else,
yeah, I mean, there's always the tape that you have too, so, but the written minutes, I mean, the best way to correct that is everybody takes a look at it off time, gets the amendments to the chair and to Beverly, and they can get worked in at the next meeting.
Well, Brian, I gotta say, I think the most important part is to make sure the votes are recorded correctly.
That's correct.
Exactly.
A lot of times things are just written as a lengthy discussion ensued. Because no one expects Beverly to type out, 500 or 5,000 words of discussion. So I think the real record is the votes, and as long as they're accurate, we're getting some pretty good information.
I would just like to say, as a note taker on another board that I sit on, it's a very tenuous and difficult job, and it's not easy to do.
It is not.
I agree. I've been there before. I'm merely saying, and I agree with everything, especially what Brian said. We can't get this perfect. That's not our objective, but we can at least take what we get from Beverly and try to improve them to the best we can. And
Absolutely. So why don't we postpone the acceptance of these minutes until next week? We'll get changes if George has some and anybody else, and we'll move on.
agree.
The third item on the agenda is the election of the new chair. Dan and I kind of talked about this. We've already done it last week, although I would jokingly say if anybody else wants to step in.
I didn't know if you were really in it until I spoke to you the other day. So now that I know you're really in it, we're good.
Oh, is that the decision we came to? Okay,
I think so. Yeah. I was worried about you,
We're going to have to work through this as time goes on. It's a learning process for everybody.
Yes.
So do we need to do this again, or can
No,
we?
you're already been installed. You're good. So I just didn't know how the outcome was going to be. So you're good.
Okay. So fourth is the department heads. Dan, you want to take that?
No, I have two department heads here for you today. Frank Frederickson, the police chief, and Phil Simonian, the fire chief. And I also see Deputy Fire Chief John Sawyer is here. So I guess whoever unmutes first can go first. That means go. Phil, Frank, John. There you go. Phil, you're in.
Hi, nice to meet all of you. Phil Simonian, the fire chief. I know you have some new members on board, and welcome, and look forward to working with you all.
Phil, I know you got some capital budget item requests going to go in for special town meeting. Can you just brief the committee on that real quick?
Sure. So we had a few items that were not at the June town meeting, other than the ambulance. So we were hoping to push those items forward for this fall. In addition to that, a few other items have come up, kind of serious. One is a roof replacement of a rubber membrane on our Station 2 in Yarmouthport, which has been patched a few times. And So there's going to be a request for that. We have some photos to show the patches on the roof, but it won't make it through another winter if we don't address it this fall. And also we have a couple of our apparatus are in desperate need of repair. 2 of them have been offline for over a year, and they've got corrosion and mechanical problems. So we're seeking some funding to help assist in getting those back on the road so they can pass inspection. They both failed inspection. So we're looking for some help with that as well.
And the funding source for these are out of the ambulance account?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the ask would be from the Reserve for Appropriation Ambulance Fund. Yes.
Can you give the finance committee a little bit of update as to how the fund is performing this year?
Currently to date, it's about 1.2 million in there. I haven't got the latest right in front of me, but that was as of last week. It might be a slightly higher amount now.
But in general, it's considered to be pretty healthy.
Yes.
Where would it normally typically be? Is that about the same amount, 1.2-ish, give or take?
For this time of year, I would need to defer to Ed Centio from the finance director. Right? He may have a better handle on exactly where. I think we're a little bit ahead of last year because we did do an ambulance fee increase a while back, and our run volume is pretty consistent. We were a little bit slower this year because of the COVID. Some people just didn't want to go to the hospital, honestly, and didn't call for service as we usually do. So we're probably, last time I checked, we were right around 80 to 100 runs behind last year at this time. So that might reflect a little bit on the ambulance revenue as well, because that's less transports that we're doing to the hospital.
I'm not sure if Ed has anything that he can add to this as it relates to how this year's performance has been over previous years.
Yeah, actually, we're ahead slightly. So we're doing fairly well in terms of the revenues. And we're also chasing down some receivables. Some grant money went to Yarmouth, Maine. I talked to the deputy chief about this today. He went to Yarmouth, Maine instead of Yarmouth, Massachusetts. And I got to get on the phone like every 2 weeks and beat them up to try to get it. But we've got some money there. And our town accountant just completed the ambulance report and submitted that today. Last year, that was about $140,000 that went into the ambulance fund. That's Medicare reimbursements, and we're one of the few towns or communities in the state that will take on that type of work. And that's because of the automation that the fire department has and the automation that the finance department has put in place. So we'll be looking to add some additional dollars that aren't yet there in that fund.
So Ed, that being said, you're comfortable with the premise of the funding source for the chief's asks here this year?
Very comfortable.
Phil, is there anything else you want to add to the group?
Yeah, just there's also a couple of things on there. We were fortunate enough, the deputy chief, we got 2 assistance to firefighter grants, one for COVID PPE supplies, and also to upgrade some of our older extrication equipment, which is airbags, struts, jaws of life, things of that nature. So we'll need our share of the match, the 10%, which is also on there as an ask as well from the ambulance fund.
Chief, can you share with everybody the staffing level of the department presently, and then also how you rate as run volume goes as it relates to the size of the department?
Sure. So we're currently 15 per shift with an 11-man minimum with 3 stations. So we dropped down to 11 as a minimum. Quite frankly, quite often actually, and would like to increase the manpower down the road if possible, because our run volume continues to we have a lot of simultaneous runs that come in and we run out of people very quickly. So that they studied that and they identified us as having a high volume of concurrent calls. So we would love to, at some point when things get better, increase the manpower. The study recommended that we get up to an 18-man shift with the 3 fire stations. So we're hopeful down the road. We're at 15 now. We'd love to incrementally increase that in the next few years to get us up to that level, and we'd be able to provide much better service to the other areas of town. Currently, there's only 3 in the outlying stations in Yarmouthport and West Yarmouth, and when they leave to go on a run, there's nobody in that building for up to about an hour. So you'll be serviced from South Yarmouth, which is a much higher response time across town. So the
How
hope
many
is now,
ambulances are you running every day?
so we have 4 on the road every day. The 5th one is available if we need it, either we can take one down for maintenance, or we can also staff it if we have to for major incidents.
And so just to kind of give the committee some perspective, 2003 to just like last year was the first update in staffing. How did your call volume grow in those, 15 years since then?
Oh, it's gone up tremendously. Yeah. So in 2003, we opened the 3rd station and we increased we went to a 14-man group with the 3 stations. We had no increase in manpower, as Dan said, up until last year. And we were fortunate enough to get a grant for the 4 new paramedic positions to help fund that. And we added the 4 positions. It's the first increase in staff in 15 years.
Chief, could I just add, I believe in 2003, our run volume was around 5,500.
Yes.
And now it's like 7,400.
Yeah. We're coming up on 7,500 in the next year or 2. We'll probably break that.
Chief, what would be the criteria for going to an 11-man minimum shift as opposed to the 15? What brings you down there, and what would be the new minimum if you got to the 18?
So the collective bargaining agreement, we work through that as well with the firefighters union, and we also the 11-man minimum is based on people either out injured, sick, vacation, personal days. So we restrict vacation time, so only 3 members are allowed to be off out of the 15 on vacation. So that would leave 12. By going to that extra man, a lot of times we're at the 12 instead of the 11 with that extra man. But we do have a high injury rate, unfortunately. It's gotten a lot better since we've added some new equipment, especially the power lift stretchers. So our injury rates seem to be declining, which is a great thing. And we're able to keep more guys working on duty. So historically, that's the 11-man minimum. I'd love to go to 12, but I financially can't do it unless we increase the budget to do it, because it's going to cost us more overtime to maintain 12 with only 15. So if 3 are only allowed off and then another guy takes a personal day, that's an overtime shift because we're dropping below the 12. Right now we're at 11, so up to 4 can be off before it causes an overtime shift.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief or deputy?
I have a few.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, George. You go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand this account that we were talking about originally. I'm assuming this is funded by insurance payments or portions of insurance not paid that are pushed on to the individual for giving a ride to the hospital. So is that where this is coming from?
Yeah, the ambulance receipts, yes.
So what percentage of these receivables are collected?
We do pretty well. Collection wise, I'd have to defer to Ed on the exact percentages if he knows that.
It's.
I mean, I'm assuming all the insurance.
High 90s.
Oh, okay. So all the insurance is collected. It's just individuals may be hard pressed at times, and we.
Right.
Okay.
It was never the intention for the individuals to assume the whole cost of the ambulance. There was an opportunity to, if they have insurance, to get the reimbursement. It's a cost recovery. It's not like we're making money on the ambulance. It's really a cost recovery to help support the operation of the fire department.
No, I understand. I just want to make sure we are collecting receivables, especially from insurance companies.
Our billing company that we utilize does a very good job, and they work really well with town staff between the finance department and the girls here at the fire department in the administrative office.
Okay.
All set, George?
Yep.
Great. Hi, Chief Stephanie Cox. I'm one of the new members.
Hi.
So thank you so much for your information. I have a few points of clarification. One was regarding the ambulance fund. You said there's 1.2 million. Are you proposing to have the apparatus themselves only paid for with that fund, or the roof replacement as well?
So we're proposing to pay for everything out of there. The ambulance fund fully funds the capital requests of the fire department, has for several years. And also a large portion of it goes to the operating side of the fire department for wages and overtime. So usually in past town administrations, we've tried to keep that balance because, you know, a portion of it is dedicated for the operation side. So that would leave us normally, we would always try to stay within the $400,000 to $600,000 range for capital. So like if we buy a large purchase, like we did with a pumper back in 2016, we ended up paying full for the pumper out of the ambulance fund, but we borrowed some money from stabilization and we've been paying it back $100,000 a year. That enables us, because you can imagine if we only have $500 to $600 to spend, if we buy it all in one purchase, we couldn't buy other things that we need to operate the fire department. So by allowing us to borrow from stabilization, we don't pay any interest, number one, which is a great thing. And also we have the ability to buy other things during that fiscal year.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you referenced that the run volume, I don't know if run volume means ambulance or fire or both.
It's combined both. I'm sorry.
Fine.
I should have clarified that.
So it went up 5,500 to 7,400 in the past 17 years. That's quite a big jump. And I'm trying to make use of the indicators that Andrea did share with us. And it doesn't go back all the way to 2003, but it does go back to 2008 to 2018. And it does look like our population has dropped by at least 500 people or so. So what would you attribute that to? Is it that we have more seniors? Is it that we have more drug overdoses? Like how would you kind of explain that?
It's a combination of those things. You know, people are getting a year older every year, and we do have a high elderly population in town that requires a lot of medical services. We have some new projects that have been filled in town, like the Cavalier project that's full now. There's going to be another affordable housing thing going into West Yarmouth, the Simpkin residences. So as we increase these places, it puts a little bit of a burden on police and fire resources, because now you're adding more population in those communities that are densely populated, and a lot of them need medical and police services.
Okay. I would be interested at some point in seeing a little bit more of a breakdown between the increase in calls related to, you know, both medical issues for seniors and, you know, drug related issues, you know, as a percentage of, you know, call volume or run volume. Broken down over, you know, over that growth period, because I think it would be interesting for us to look at in terms of our overall policies and what we're trying to do to encourage a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Holistic community that has, you know, people of diverse ages and whatnot. Another question that I have for you is, so I just see that, you know, in the Board of Selectmen's mission and goals, that there is a recommendation for a new centrally located station. Is that something that you're still pursuing at this point in time?
Yeah, we would love that. That's a long range plan. We have currently 3 stations, 2 of which are older. They're wood frame. One's completely wood frame, Station 2 in Yarmouthport. Station 1 in South Yarmouth has been around for a long time and been added on to. It's a half masonry block, half wood frame. And it was very evident during the tornado when I sat in this building and was very concerned. I was assisting the dispatcher until we could get more people in the building, whether or not the roof was actually going to stay on this building. It was pretty scary to be sitting in the dispatch center with just the two of us dispatching calls during the tornado until we got more help that we were not in a hardened facility, and we need to be in a hardened facility. And so I think for efficiency, for less apparatus, and a better distribution of the workforce, if you go to two stations, one centrally located in the middle of town, somewhere in the area of Forest, Old Townhouse, West Yarmouth Road area, and you maintain the West Yarmouth station as well, now you take those 15 or more individuals and you can have 6 in West Yarmouth. So now you can handle 2 calls in West Yarmouth. And then you can traverse from Yarmouth Port to South Yarmouth from that central station a lot easier, either via West Yarmouth Road, Station Ave, Union Street, or south on Forest or Station Ave, or West Yarmouth Road to West Yarmouth. So to me, it makes sense. And from a maintenance perspective, you know, we're not going to be throwing a lot of money fixing these older buildings, which it continues to happen each year.
Makes sense. Thank you. And I'm only a few doors down from the Yarmouth Port Station, so I see them going in and out all the time, doing a good job. And I guess the last question, this is maybe a question for both chiefs, but I see that one of the other goals for the select board is to have a sort of updated town response on opioid addiction and substance abuse within the town. And potentially having some kind of staff position, potentially something regional. I know when I worked for Congressman Keating years ago, your predecessor had spoken to me about the idea of having some kind of nurse or someone who could be following up on calls to sort of further triage if somebody is in need of substance use counseling or hospitalization. Can you give any kind of update as far as that goes?
I would probably defer to Chief Frederickson, because I think Chief Frederickson may have something in place for the opioid assistance. I know they've been coming to the police station, there've been meetings there. I would defer that to Chief Frederickson if he's willing to answer that.
We can hold off until the chief speaks. I don't want to take up all of your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
But there is a committee in town that deals with the opioid addiction and other drugs. And our EMS Lieutenant Supervisor, Chris McMahon, is on that committee. And before him, Lieutenant Roberts was very active on that committee as well.
Okay.
Yeah, when Bruce Murphy comes in to talk about the budget later in the year, he'll explain to you, give you an overview. We have this loose confederacy of different social service agencies that we work with, including some staff position in the police department, to make that safety net. It's certainly not foolproof, but it's certainly demonstrated to be very cost effective and pretty effective as to what it is that it does. So, Phil, that's it? We're good?
I got a couple of questions.
There you go.
This may be both to the chief and to Ed in finance. Chief had mentioned something to the effect that they would finance a pumper or some large thing out of this because it is no expense. So I guess my question, no interest expense. So my question to Ed is there no opportunity cost charge for this? And then the second thing is, do we consider maybe borrowing instead of paying it out of these funds, either through a municipal lease or just a straight up borrowing? At times when the rate of cost of financing is so cheap, I wonder why we're not doing that.
Yeah, you're correct. There is an opportunity cost. There's also an appearance cost as we work with S&P for our bond rating. So as you indicated, at the time this was done, the interest rates were higher. We had already gotten a 2-notch increase in our S&P bond rating. But if this were something that would be done now, then I would probably recommend that we actually borrow because the interest rates are so low. So it depends on the situation. It depends on where we are with our rating. You know, we just try to be flexible in finance to realize what environment we're currently in. And then depending on that environment, we would make that particular decision with input from the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen, obviously, definitely the Fire Department and others.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, and the only time we really need to utilize the stabilization fund is for the major purchase. An ambulance purchase, we can fully fund with the ambulance account without borrowing from stabilization. But to buy a pumper fully equipped, it's more than what we would have available in the ambulance fund to utilize for capital.
I have a quick question. Chief, you mentioned the long-term project of the new station. Is there any other bigger long-term capital projects like that you have on your horizons, I guess is the best way to put it?
Yeah, I have I submitted a 3 to 5 year capital plan. The station's a big one. More manpower. It's not really a capital, it's more operating. Just keep upgrading the equipment as necessary. I mean, we keep our fire apparatus and our ambulances. Ambulances we have are 9 to 10 years old when we get rid of them. We just got rid of a 2009 this year. Prior to that, we had a 1986 pumper that we retired finally. That was 30 years old in 2016, and we purchased a new one. So it would just be really to maintain the apparatus and keep updating equipment as we need to.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the chief?
Phil, this is Nate.
Hi, Nate.
Why don't you, I think you ought to explain to them too that corrosion here on the Cape is a killer for your equipment.
It is. I mean, we do a good job cleaning it and we're very thorough, but unfortunately between the salt environment we live here on Cape Cod, as well as the chemicals that are being put on the roads, it's really taken a toll on the fire apparatus. So we have a 2007 pumper currently right now that the frame rails are in need of repair. And, it's only 13 years old, which is not really very old. It still runs out of the Yarmouth Port Station every day, but it's time that we got to address that. And that's one of the pumpers that we were looking for extra funding to fix. But the other trucks too, they're all having corrosion issues as the DPW vehicles are and the police vehicles. Everybody's susceptible to it, unfortunately, because of where we live and also the chemicals that they're putting on the roads now for de-icing.
Good thing we're gonna have that beautiful wash station at the new DPW building to take advantage of. That'll be nice.
We're looking forward to it. Hopefully we'll be able to utilize it as well.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay. Chief Frederickson, you ready?
Always ready. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. See some head nodding. So where do we want to start?
Well, what do you have in front of the, for special town meeting? You have a couple, I think you have at least one ask, or actually.
Everything got turned upside down. And so here we are with our special town meeting. So there are two items that you're going to see that are presented to you. One of which is a necessity that was already approved at town meeting with the taser purchases. Right now, we only have 5 tasers that are in warranty, which is not a good thing. We have taken the reserve officers' tasers away from them and put them into service for our full-time officers. And we have no spares left. So the plan that was presented at last spring was to do a 5-year cycle of about $27,000 a year that will continuously keep the tasers up to date. It was a program worked out by Taser, and it seemed to be a good solution to keep the equipment up and running properly. Very important piece of equipment, because without them, you use that less lethal option. What does it leave you with? It leaves you with a lethal option, which is what we obviously are trying to avoid. So that's one thing. We'd like to get that program going. What we did do in the interim is we purchased out of some forfeited money some tasers to get us through. Those are not here yet. We put in a grant to buy 6 or 7 more. We haven't been approved for that grant yet. We hopefully will get it. We don't know, but we would like to maintain this program so that we never have a taser problem again. So that's one thing. The second piece is something that we were not expected to be involved with. That is the HVAC system. We often call this the new station, but the new station is now 19 years old. And unfortunately, when you do a public works building, you go to lowest bid. And so our system has been historically bad since day one. The system was put in by 4 different contractors that did not talk to each other. We put in a boiler system that was built basically for an aircraft carrier, and a AC unit that couldn't work off of the controls. The ductwork was horrible. It was put in backwards, which has caused us a lot of headaches. That needs to be fixed. There's been a number of problems. We've had probably a minimum of 5 different consultants over the past 19 years come and review the system, and every time they come out of the ceiling and they just shake their head and they find something that the other person didn't find. So to make a long story short, we come to the conclusion, and it's not a conclusion, it is a need, that the AC unit needs to be replaced. The problem is it's a huge project because of everything has to be disassembled piece by piece and brought in piece by piece. So we need for the money, we're looking to get money to spec it out and get the bids out. It's estimated to be somewhere in a ballpark of $2 million. Yep, $2 million to fix the AC unit. And with a little bit of luck, that will be the last time we have to do anything with it if we do it correctly. So those are the big 2 things that you see in front of you right now. That is not all the capital items we had in the past, because most of ours we can't do. It's already been cut. So that's all we have in front of you.
Anybody have any questions for the chief?
Chief, is that going to get us through the winter, that heating system, or are we?
I think with the heat, we believe they're just switching it over this week, that the heat should be okay. The AC unit will not make it next summer. It will not make. We were lucky. They had to keep coming in and filling up the units because the gas was leaking out at different points. We're able to limp through the summer. It will not make it next summer. So this is a priority that has to get done before next summer. And if you think about the project, what we have to do to get it spec'd and bid, and then get a contractor that can do the work all by sometime by early June, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So the first step is to get the money, and so you're looking at November. So it's a very tight window, and this was not anything that was planned or that we could have foreseen. So it has to get done. If we do not do it, we have to come up with some emergency solutions to keep the building cool enough so we don't end up in a situation like in Dartmouth, where they had a sick building that they basically had to destroy the police department and build a new one. It wasn't that old of a building. And that was, we're not talking ancient history, that was about 4 years ago. So if that air system isn't corrected by summer, we're gonna have more significant issues.
Thank you. Any other questions for the chief?
I have a couple. Hey, Chief. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Stephanie.
So couple of questions. I have a question for Jeff as far as that HVAC system, hoping that doesn't happen again. But as far as the taser purchase, I don't think we have anything like in front of us right now as far as what's that's going to cost. Can you tell me how much that's ballpark?
Well, I think it's somewhere around 23,000. Hold on, I can take a look at it.
I think Kyle's going to bring up the warrant a little bit later tonight. I think it's $23,000.
Okay, that's not a huge change. Okay, thank you. And did you say that you have them now, or are they?
Don't have. We purchased 7 out of some forfeiture money that we haven't got those all online yet. And we did put in for a grant. Like I said, we haven't been approved for the grant, but we applied for it. We'll see if, and that will get us a few more because it's, you know, we're doing the best we can.
Okay, and then as far as capital, what is the status of the training facility at this point?
Yeah, good question. The training facility, you're going to see a lot of work being done on that very soon. There's a very significant amount of money that the Police Foundation raised to pay for that. So the building itself, when that, and the landscape and the fencing, the pavement, that is not costing the town anything. That is going to be all paid for. Matter of fact, all of the roofing, the siding, the windows, the doors, the electrical work, everything is ordered. It's in a warehouse. They're waiting for the steel, which is also going to be paid for. That is all being cut right now. So there's no money from the town's funds going towards that. The piece that we did have cut was to get, I think, in 2 pieces from capital and free cash was about $300,000 that would go a long way towards the final phase, which was the 2-lane 25-yard shooting range that would be right on the grounds and back of the station. So without that, I'm not sure the exact number, because sometimes the foundation doesn't really tell us exactly what they have, because they want to make sure we're working hard and raising, getting some donations. And I have to be careful with, obviously, but the foundation does most of that work. So that's put us behind a little bit. The hope is that should things recover, that we could get to that goal. We are prepping the site for it to be in place. So the conduits for the electrical work are there. Some of the site prep has already been done, but that's the last phase. So we'll have to work on that after this year, because clearly I don't think the town is going to drop $500,000 in our lap to finish off the project at this point.
Do you have, or could you provide, you don't have to necessarily do it right this second, but it would be helpful for me just as a new member to understand the total project cost, and then how much has been provided by the town, and how much, if anything more, we would be expected to provide, and timeline for finishing. I think those will all be really helpful information points.
All right, we'll take it one at a time. The expected cost for completing the facility, the building, and we're talking phase. You remember this was 4 different phases. Phase 1 is completed. That's the 2 rooms in the basement with the Milo system, the interactive piece, and that has been completed. That did not cost the town anything. The foundation paid for that. Phase 2 and 3 are the canine training area and the building. That is what's going to be is being worked on right now. It's hopefully by next spring it'll be all operational. That will not cost the town any money. The only expectation that could be is expenses moving forward to keep it running, and some maintenance issues. We don't expect that to be a lot of money. And actually the John Gannon golf tournament that we started last year, the concept of that was to run that and use that for any maintenance of the facility moving forward. Unfortunately, we could not run it this year because the first year it was successful, but anytime you do things the first year, you don't reach your pinnacle of what you're going to do. So that this was expected to be a bigger year. We got it figured out, and then we move forward and do it for about 5 years and build some capital that we could last for quite a few years. There is some ideas that we may even put some solar panels on the roof. That's very doable and probably going to happen. That can be done at any time, but we've been dealing with Ed Centio on that a little bit a few months ago, but that'll likely pay for any of the electricity needed for the building. There won't be a lot there because it's not a finished building like the headquarters. It's pretty much a bare bones building where we can move some wall, make some temporary walls, move it around upstairs, some attic, some basement, crawl spaces, different obstacles that we can go with. Fire department can use it for different things too. We can add, some smoke in there to get into the building a little bit, just different little things that we can do to make it very versatile, to meet some of the training needs that we can't do right now. So the expectation is it's going to be outstanding, and that we'll get a lot of use out of it. I'm not sure if I completed the cost. The estimated cost to do the whole project, not counting the shooting trailer, is about $500,000. That we have that covered.
So the 300,000 you referenced was what?
That was to go towards the shooting trailer. The trailer itself is somewhere in the area of $700,000, which includes the installation of the pad, etc. So the foundation, their goal was to get us as close to that as possible. And with the 300,000 that the town had, we were pretty confident we were going to get to that. But obviously, we can't do anything until we get the money in hand, because it's a significant project that they're built out in Las Vegas and they get shipped here. So you can't. It's nothing you can bring back. So we got to be certain, and they want them. Obviously, they'll build it on demand.
So then another question that I have for you is just sort of with the context of one of your predecessors is working on getting a training facility built at the base, right? And then where there's also this conversation about a shooting range being built at the base. What, if any, overlap is there? I just don't know enough about this to know.
Well, that's a great question. I've been heavily involved with the Cape Cod Police Academy and its inception and where it's gone right now. So the simple thing, like all of us would think it would be a very easy concept to, hey, we got this 20-something thousand acre military base with all types of assets out there that, boy, common sense, we could put an academy right out there, use their facilities. We talk with fire has different things that we could do out there. It makes all the sense in the world. We got
Federal government never makes sense.
It all makes sense. But what we've discovered, we are grateful that we've been able to do what we can do. But we found that there are a lot of boundaries out there. There's a reason why they call it Joint Base Cape Cod, because it's very confusing to understand who has control over what property, and they all have different rules. They all have different ways of charging. They all have different levels of what someone can use and not use. Matter of fact, first class, you would think that with an 18,000 acre base, 20,000 acre base, that we could use this shooting range, right? We couldn't use it. So we had to go down to Brewster and come up with it. The last class we ran, they allowed us to use it. Now we get charged for that. They charge us per day, per hour for everything we use on certain pieces. The Coast Guard has different rules. The Coast Guard doesn't charge us for anything. So we're learning this as we go on. I know former Police Chief Carnes is the director of the academy. He had a meeting out at the base 2 days ago. And they got the okay. They're running their third class in January. And they got the assurances that they can use the theater. There's a movie theater out there that they're going to run the academy. They'll have 60 students in it, which will be ironically, the largest academy in the state, because all the other ones are restricted to 25 COVID, which is hampering providing police training. Somebody's, I can't even hear myself. I got somebody on there.
Jack, you want to mute your speaker a little bit? Looks like you're the, or maybe it's you too.
Thank you. Okay, so it's an asset that's still, it's a work in progress to actually get things up and running. We're not trying to build anything out of the base. We would love, I know the Municipal Police Training Committee loves the concept of being out at the base because, hey, you know, one-stop shopping, that's what we really are looking towards. Because they have the key components there, but it's frustrating to see what's out there that we can't touch. There is a facility out there owned by the Army that is absolutely stunning, might be an overstretch, but perfect, brand new, first class, everything you need. We can't use it, and there's nobody in it. It's amazing. So it's that frustration, but yet we got to work with them and try to get that academy in play. Now, the second part of this is probably related to what we're doing out back. It's what we're going to have out here is different, that we can use on a local level for our own officers. We can go out there at any time without any red tape. The canines, which is we were training over at the water department back there, and the reason we moved it over here because it got too conflicting with the busyness over at the water department. So we have our opportunity to do it out here. It's going to work out great, and other units can use it as well.
Thank you. And, you know, I definitely know with the federal government, it's never simple, especially with Joint Base Cape Cod. But if, you know, if it helps at all to be put in touch with anyone in the congressman's office or one of our senators' offices to help facilitate that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to make that happen. Another question that I have just as far as the training facility is your training facility. Is there an opportunity for other police departments to train there and for you to charge a fee?
Yeah, we've looked at that, but we're not sure that would really be beneficial for us. First of all, if the first piece would be the shooting trailer, I'd be reluctant to allow other departments come in. It's not a heavy duty 6-lane shooting range, and we really need that. That would satisfy us for most of our shooting needs. There's maintenance that's involved in it. To charge the other departments, they probably wouldn't pay us. So we would let them use it on a case-by-case basis. For example, let's say someone has one officer that needs to be trained because he got hired midstream, he's not in the academy, came to somewhere else and needs to get his qualification done. Yeah, let him come over. We can use our range and get that done. That would be a great benefit. The Cape Cod Regional SWAT team would be able to use it because they shoot more than anybody else for obvious reasons. So we would let them use it within reason, but we're a collaborative, so we wouldn't charge our own team to use it. So we have looked at that as an opportunity to get some revenue, but it's twofold. I don't know that it would generate enough to make it really worth it. And then the other wear and tear on the shooting range itself, I don't think it would pay off. It's not meant to be for 500 police officers across Cape Cod. It'll handle us fine. The other portion of the facility, I don't know that there'd be an appetite to charge a lot of people for using that. We work as teams across the Cape and Southeastern Mass and across Mass. They will come here. They will love to use our facility, but they all train together anyway. Right now they go up to Plymouth. All the canines go up to Plymouth and train. This will give an opportunity to stay right here at home and do it here. But we wouldn't necessarily charge anybody for that.
Okay. Thank you. And similar question to what I asked of the fire chief, as far as just sort of breakdown of calls, could you give me a general rough estimate of like how much is drug related, how much is like B&E, how much is, domestic violence, that type of thing?
All right, well, let me see. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna move my move around. All right. This year, we've had 25,980 calls for service. 230 of those were domestic violence calls.
I'm sorry, how many?
230. We've had 55 overdoses to date. We've stopped 3,153 cars, which is down significantly because especially when COVID hit, we really backed off on traffic enforcement for obvious reasons. We basically, it had to be a real reason to stop someone. It wasn't like we were going to just run radar for the sake of running radar because we didn't want to have too much contact with anybody. There's been 470 motor vehicle accident reports. That doesn't mean there were only 470 accidents. There were a lot of accidents we go to that are not, they're under the threshold of taking a report. They exchanged information. Burglaries, we've had 40 residential burglaries, 14 car breaks, which is amazing. I find it amazing because usually car breaks are the easiest thing to do, and people leave their cars unlocked. But I don't know whether it's because there are people home more now, that there's more eyes, Crime Watch group, but that's a pretty significant drop. Commercial breaks, we've had 10 of those. We've taken 1,306 reports, 648 arrests. When I say arrest, that doesn't necessarily mean we took somebody in custody. That's how many different people have been charged criminally. A lot of times, especially through COVID, we've been summonsing people, so we're not necessarily processing through the booking room. We try to avoid that as much as possible. We've had 41 OUI arrests. So I can go a little deeper if you want. That's a general overview. I know one thing you asked about earlier was what we do regarding opioids. Like everything, that's been impacted by COVID, but they're still out there. It's still a problem, but it's hidden, quieted. It's not the top of the list right now, obviously, but we're still there. We're still active. We still work with Gosnell on doing the interventions. Once we get an overdose, we follow those up. Matter of fact, we have joined through the county and the district attorney's office. We are now doing a program with Barnstable, Yarmouth, and Dennis, where we're using the same program they do in Plymouth, where we get a computer-generated sharing of information. So, for example, let's say Barnstable has an overdose and it's someone from Yarmouth. That information can be shared with us so we can follow that up. Otherwise, in the past, we wouldn't get that because Barnstable wouldn't come here and do it necessarily. Now, that whole program was started right here in Yarmouth, and it's moved across the country, actually. So it's kind of interesting how it's come full cycle. They've taken it. It's like everything, all good ideas. You take it, someone else takes it, they move it into something better. And now this computerized program that works, connecting departments, connecting healthcare workers, connecting rehab centers to make sure we're doing as much as we can to follow up. And it's not just the overdose person, it's families. Families are tremendously affected by someone that's overdosed, whether it's a child, a parent, a brother, a sister, a husband, a wife. They're all different. They all have, they don't get trained on how to handle this. So we do our best to get out there, be proactive, and there's no guarantees, but it's a big effort that we put forward on it.
So I'm assuming that, all these numbers definitely don't add up to 25,000. I'm assuming that there's a lot of like repeat calls and stuff in there.
Yeah, those are just the major calls. I mean, I could give you a bigger breakdown and go deeper into it, but it could be a larceny, it could be a 911 hang up, it could be assist the fire department, it could be, that's what those calls come up as.
So I'm just wondering to what extent, it sounds like by far the biggest is motor vehicle stops, but then in accidents, but to what extent are some of the bigger issues, domestic violence, sounds like overdoses haven't been as high, but to what extent are those incorporated in the training that you're doing, either through this new facility or through other types of training?
Everything. Well, most of our training is dictated by the Municipal Police Training Committee. You've heard a lot. Some of it is mandated each year. This year, we actually, just like before this meeting, we got what this year's training will be. And I'll open it up. Just give me a second.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Chief, to what extent, if there's anything that is a bigger problem here in Yarmouth or here on the Cape, that, maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention to here, as opposed to, what's something kind of statewide that.
Well, I don't know that there's anything, I think this is across the board. There's two things that go unnoticed. It's fraud, telephone fraud, scams. Those are significant, and maybe more so in our communities because we have a high elderly population who are more easily scammed by phones. People are alone. Some people are, in the age, they lose a loved one and they're unsure of themselves sometimes. So they can easily get scammed in many different ways. Even people with their own, they're in good shape, they're younger. Some of these people are very convincing. That is probably the biggest issue that goes unreported or unknown, how bad of a problem that is. You're all getting the calls, I'm certain, of the scams, the IRS scams. This spring we had so many rental scams, like people trying to rent. They pick up a real estate listing and basically absorb that listing, repurpose it for their own things, make a deal. They'll look at the obituaries to see when so they know that somebody might have died like 3 months ago, and they know there's nobody there, and they say, just come by, take a look, and they do it. And there was a lot of that going on. So that is one thing that's probably a little more prevalent in our community than others across the state, but the scams are huge. The other thing we already talked about is mental wellness. That is very significant. We put a lot of effort into that. We are part of the One Mind campaign with the International Association of Police Chiefs to get everybody trained in mental health first aid, which we've done. We also are trying to get 25% of officers trained deeper into mental health. We also have a part-time advocate that he works 10 hours a week, but he's the busiest man on the department when he's here for his 10 hours because there's a lot of issues, and our hope is that we prevent a lot of things if we can interact quicker. Our homeless population is significantly rising, and these aren't people who found themselves homeless because of they might have lost their jobs. They're mostly homeless because they are mentally ill, and it's hard to repair them. Let's put it that way. And we started really cataloging them, and it's pretty significant to see where we've come. And you've probably seen them around town more significant. They're hanging out down Bass River, right along the river. South Yarmouth has really been more significant because West Yarmouth, we've always had a bunch that come in and out of Hyannis up by the hospital, the different parts, but I wouldn't call it migration, but the widespread homelessness is more significant. We've got to know them, so it's like, what do you do? We do have our advocates go talk, and we have our officers interact with them to do the best to trying to find whatever service we can. But like I said, some of these people, they're just so mentally ill that that's their life. They're hard to fix.
So I don't want to hold you hostage. I'm sure there's other members of the committee who have questions, but I just want to close by thanking you for everything that you presented, and just closing the loop on that last piece. I mean, I think it would just sort of, it would make sense to me that the whatever training dollars are sort of going into training, our frontline people are somewhat proportional to the types of demand, the type of services that are being needed. I think that's kind of important. And then the other thing is, I believe you're the head of the Chiefs Association right now.
Yeah.
And so, I love the model of having, this part-time person who can do some follow-up, some social work, follow-up. And so to whatever extent that we can do something regionally and get more economies of scale and get more people that serving, because people are crossing town boundaries all the time, and we have a major drug problem across the entire Cape. So to whatever extent we can kind of work together across town boundaries to share those costs and to get more services in that way, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, we not that I'm complaining, but having a part-time person 10 hours a week, it not only helps us and may prevent things, also the fire department, how many times we call the fire department to help transport and get somebody that needs an evaluation. There's a lot to it. If we can provide them services, and there are some cases where when we really know them, and we can get to them and we can check on them and say, hey, you taking your meds today? And we can keep them off the ledge for day by day. It makes a difference, and we don't want to get into a situation. I mean, there are lots of situations that can turn bad real quick, and we need all those other pieces of policing that we do.
Thanks a lot, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Well, seeing none, thank you, Chief, for your time this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are we done? Do you want me to
Yeah,
leave?
No, you explained the stuff on the warrant that you have in front of the board, the committee, so you're good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Will do.
We're all set too, Dan?
Yes, sir, you're good. Yep,
Okay, folks, thank you very much. Have a good night.
thank you.
Dan, I do just have a question for
Yeah.
Jeff. Just following up on what Chief Frederickson said about 4 different contractors not talking to each other 19 years ago when the police building was built. You don't need to go into a ton of detail, but can you just tell us that that's not happening anymore?
Well, we're certainly going to avoid that. That's for sure. I think there's, a lot of lessons learned from that police HVAC system. From what I gather, it's, before my time in Yarmouth, but there wasn't an owner's project manager. That wasn't required at the time. It's now required. There wasn't any kind of commissioning of the system. So nobody at the end of the installation proved that it worked. And so that's now required. So there's a lot of things that have changed, both in procurement. We now have to do a full-blown designer selection of this. We need a commissioning agent. It really is complicated. And so the $280,000 that's being sought is a really tight budget. It sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but there's a lot of things that have to happen to develop the plans and specifications. The chief has to live in that facility, so he has a firsthand knowledge of all the problems it has. But just in order to get the work done, there's a lot of safeguards. I think there'll be an answer to your question, but there are a lot of challenges. It's a big little project, and he indicated that there's a $2 million estimate out there. That's just one estimate. The more I dig into this and find out about it, we still don't have design plans, but I wouldn't be surprised if the price tag of this goes above $3 million. It's a really extensive issue, not just with the equipment, but like the chief said, the duct work and both the heating and the cooling system. And it's a pretty good sized building. So there's just a lot of challenges. We'll get it right this time, but it is going to be a big effort to do so.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just, as far as any future construction in general, as long as we can apply those lessons learned, I think that we'll be in good shape. Thank you, Jeff.
Stephanie? Yeah. Jeff also has a second PE on his staff, which we didn't have years ago. So he's well equipped now with professional people. Jeff's a PE. There's another one. We just have a lot better staff than we had 20 years ago. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
Dan, so what are we
yeah,
doing?
well-
Financial reports?
Yeah, well, actually, before we go on to that, because we have Jeff here on the phone, and I know we're running kind of late here. Why don't we bring, if you don't mind, the draft articles up, because there's still a few more that I'd like to have you review before we close the book on tonight, and while Jeff's still on the call. Kyle, are you able to bring the draft warrant up? The remaining articles are going to deal with water capital and wastewater, so it's good to have Jeff available for that.
Yeah, so I can cover any of the items that you'd like in here, but I think the ones that Dan's referring to might be in Article 2. We had a larger number of capital requests in the spring, but many of those have been cut, or the funds have been pushed towards other needs. One of the most important needs that we have, at least within water, is what's labeled here on the screen as facility improvements. That's an estimate of $3 million. That's for our pump stations. That is only phase one of the project, so there are 2 other phases, but this is a phase for facility improvements that will take care of the confined space issues within our older pump stations. There's now these wells that the operators need to go down into and can't get in there properly without the, can't get in there properly because they have to be in harnesses and tripods, and the tripods don't fit over the openings. So there's some significant OSHA and confined space issues that this first phase will take care of in all the pump stations, as well as remove all the asbestos in all the pump stations. But there are still many pump stations, of which we have 24, that will need to have new roofs, new windows, some new doors. So there's several other phases, 2 other phases of the project. But this $3 million is a placeholder because we do expect that number will change. What was approved in what's shown in parentheses under facility improvements is the 1.865. It's at $1,865,000. That was approved by capital budget in the spring to go on the warrant. Since that time, some of the costs have increased, but we've also added so that it will cover all of the pump stations that have both confined space as well as asbestos issues will be taken care of in this first phase. So it's a little bit higher number. Because of the uncertainty within the construction environment and the way bids are coming in, what we proposed to the selectmen in July when we talked about this project, as well as all the other water projects, we proposed doing it the same way we did the DPW building, to have a bid in hand. So we've already opened the file sub bids, and at the end of the month, we'll be opening the general contractor bids for that phase of the pump station projects. And we will have an actual number to have moved at town meeting. So it'll be, the $3 million is the engineer's estimate. It'll be probably close to that. We of course hope it comes in less. With that approach for the DPW building, we had about an $18 million placeholder, and bids came in at $16.4 million. So we are hopeful it'll be a little bit less, but we do expect to have a accurate number with a bid in hand for town meeting. So that is the facilities improvement component. I don't know if there's any questions about that, but again, it's similar to what we did for a capital project last year, much bigger capital project, but we had good success in getting good bids and not having to rely on an engineer's estimate and then find out the bids come in higher after the fact. So that's the big water project. The other item under Article 2 for water is the well redevelopment. It says well development there, but that's a maintenance program for us. We do 4 to 5 of our wells. Again, we have 24 of those. And that redevelopment project is proactive maintenance. We do 4 or 5 every year. So each year there's a new 4 to 5 that we do. And that $205,000 will cover that. The reason it's 4 to 5 is because if there's no other major pump rebuilding, it's just a matter of pulling the motor and cleaning the well casing and doing some preventive maintenance. We can get 5 of them done. If there's a broken shafts or problems with motors that need to be replaced, we end up having to back off and only do 4 of them. But we expect that $205,000 to be needed every cycle. We needed it now to do 4 to 5 this year. In the spring, we'll be looking for another $205,000 to do 4 to 5 wells as well. So we've got a very good proactive well maintenance program going, and that $205,000 keeps that going. Some of the other articles that we had proposed, we felt we could hold off on in these tight fiscal times, but not the well redevelopment. That needs to happen. It's a cleaning program essentially. So those are the well projects. I don't know if there's any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, is that the only items you have for the Finance Committee to review?
Yeah, it was just the well item, the water items,
Yep.
which was slightly different than for the Springtown meeting with that $3 million placeholder. And then, of course, the police HVAC system, which we covered pretty extensively. All the other items were from the spring.
Yep.
There's an item in here for facilities HVAC repairs. I think the need with the police station HVAC highlights the need to do good proactive maintenance. And that's what that $50,000 is. That was also something that was planned for in the spring. So there isn't anything else in here that wasn't previously approved by capital budget and was anticipated. There's the highway funds. That's a slight decrease in what's been funded in previous years, but we feel it's enough to get us through in these tight fiscal times. And that was the $1.1 million, Dan. So those are really the items in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jeff? No? Okay. So Brian, yep, thank you, Jeff. Do you want to continue with a review of the warrant, or do you want to go back up to financial reports?
Well, the warrant's already up, so
yeah,
why don't we do that? We also have to do the capital budget appointee as well from the Finance Committee. That has to get done tonight.
Yep. Okay. Kyle, you there? I cut out here, so it takes me a while to go on this. So Article 1, so we had a conversation with the Board of Selectmen last meeting about how much free cash maybe would they want to see used for an appropriation for this for this fall town meeting. And what we, the upshot of that was they wanted to have just the things that need to get done presented to them from free cash. We're still in a position where, we're not really sure what the financial forecast for next year is going to be. So we don't want to use up too much free cash. So this represents this list here, the things that, going back to the departments that need to get worked on. The 2 items for the schools, I believe, is going to be removed. We're waiting to get confirmation from the school administration on that, but I think they're deferring those projects to the spring. So what you see on item 1 or Article 1 is just things that we feel need to get attended to between now and next spring. And I will say with COVID-19 being around, there's a renewed emphasis on HVAC maintenance.
Sorry, Dan, can you just clarify, has this gone out to us? I don't recall seeing
I
it.
believe it was supposed to be sent out to you earlier today. I'm not sure if it was able, I was out this afternoon, so I'm not sure.
I don't think it was sent out. I don't recall getting it.
Okay. You'll have it by tomorrow then.
Okay, thank you.
This isn't like necessarily the final. You can see there's still some highlighted pieces there. So it shouldn't change much from what I talked to you about tonight, but this is pretty close to the finished product that'll be presented to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night. It goes to capital budget tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a little late for us to be looking at this right now. Are we expected to vote on this in some way?
No, I just wanted to be able to share this with you in advance of Tuesday night's meeting. And we have plenty of time to take a vote on these things before special town meeting on the 20th. You want to roll to number 2? I think you saw number 2. Number 2. Yeah, this is the water account that Jeff was just talking about. And then there's also on Article 3, the fire department appropriation requests. And there's also waste management. Those were deferred from the spring, sanitation vehicle replacement and some design work for the transfer station platform up there. And then golf has, we had a problem with Bayberry Hills, the part of the roof blew off in one of the storms we had a while ago, so it needs some emergency repairs. And they had a deferral of a dump truck. That money will come out of their retained earnings account. Article 4, we can probably move on to this at a later meeting. This will be the whole series of wastewater articles. I know it's getting kind of late and I'm sensitive to your time commitment here. But Article 4 would take money that's found in what's referred to as a septic loan fund that the town used to have and reappropriate it, if you will, into fund available for wastewater. We need about $500,000 to fund that $5.2 million wastewater article that passed in the spring to get that started. So this is some available funds, and then we're asking for up to $250,000 in free cash also to help make that $500,000 become available for the engineering department to be able to utilize for public works. Article 5, this is what's referred to as the WIF, the wastewater or the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund. This is one of the components to financing wastewater. The surcharge, very similar to CPA. It's proposed to be 0.78% of your property tax. This also would need to go and be a ballot question as well. So step 1 is to get it passed at town meeting. Go ahead, Kyle. Next article, this is the offset that has been discussed by the Water Resources Advisory Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Board of Selectmen. This is the $100,000 exemption on the first $100,000 of property tax, which coupled with the WIF is for most properties would be a net neutral taxation. That also has to go to a ballot question in the spring as well. Number 7 is an easement request of town meeting for connecting the new DPW building, which is going to be located at 74 Townbrook Road. The Eversource needs an easement there. Go ahead, Kyle. Number 9 is CPA. There's a series of CPA articles. I have Karen Green. She'll be available at the next meeting to discuss the CPA articles that'll be requested at the town meeting coming up. So that's 9 and 10 as well. And keep going. 11 is Sandy Pond, I believe is that one, a splash pad work at Sandy Pond to get that started. Article number 12. This starts your petitioned articles. The petitioners will be at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 20th. This is the water bottle ban. And then that's 12. 13 is the climate change initiative, I believe, or is that, no, I guess it's Solarize, Solarize Yarmouth. It's in support of the Solarize program that the Energy Committee is heading up. They can come in front of you at a later time as well. I think 14 is the net zero energy design. Yeah. So that's something like we were just talking about with Jeff about the process of building a building today. Under this bylaw, it would require the town to explore the feasibility of net zero energy buildings. The police department right now, that would be a big chore to ask that to get to net zero. But going forward in the future, any new building would be evaluated at the earliest phase of design for the potential to be net zero energy. So, and then the last article, I think it's 15, is an evaluation of the feasibility of solar at the links course on the landfill cap. And that's what the draft warrant looks like. So. So we'll get the copy of that out to you. If it hasn't gone out already, I've seen some email traffic going out. It might be out already. But certainly we can look at some of those in more depth at a later meeting. And you have time before the 17th of November to vote on those.
Dan, how many do we typically, do we vote them all at once, or would that be broken up?
Well, so in this particular case, usually the finance committee takes a position and votes just on things with financial aspects to them. So you could probably easily go through that in a night and decide what you want to do. It's only, maybe there's, out of the 15, maybe there's 11 or 12 with a financial impact on them.
Okay.
Yes, Kyle, please forward that along. Kyle is talking to me by email, so.
Okay.
Um,
So we go into the financial reports? Dan?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where we stand with Andrea. I don't see her on the call. But is everybody kind of comfortable where they're at with the financial reports that'll be generated for you going forward? I'd ask that people kind of communicate with Andrea offline to get their particular individual desire lines.
No,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, I feel like we went over this like 5 times.
We did.
Dan, the committee felt that, correct me if I'm wrong, that before we can be comfortable with deciding what metrics we want, we would like sort of a metrics 101
Okay.
overview training for the committee.
Yep.
And we would decide that.
Okay, that's fine. That can happen at the next meeting if you want.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I think we would just want to make sure it doesn't go too long, because I have a feeling these meetings are going to get longer and longer as we get closer to town meeting. So if we could come with questions, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you have specific questions, always, that makes life a lot easier. That way we tailor what we're going to present to you to those questions.
So are we moving on to financial reports? No, we're not doing that. Transfers?
No transfers. No, we're good.
FinCom administrative items.
So this was an appointment for the
Yes,
capital budget.
correct. So we need a motion, I'd imagine,
Sure. Or volunteer.
a volunteer, which I believe Robert was interested in this.
I'm back. Yes, Sandy actually asked that maybe I'd consider joining go back to the CIPC. Again, they get a couple new members, so, and we're also behind at least an entire year.
Yeah.
Because we skipped a year, so
She asked me that as well for Robert.
I'd volunteer.
Okay. You want to take a vote, you can affirm that with a vote, Brian, that's fine. It's going to be by roll call.
Okay. Jack,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Stephanie,
Aye.
Robert,
I
and myself as an aye as well.
So congratulations to Robert.
New business?
So the only real new business I have, you went over the draft warrant articles, but on Tuesday night, I know we meet on the Board of Selectmen's meetings live. And one of the requests was to do a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. But I know some of the members of the Finance Committee maybe not want to be live. So we're still trying to work logistically with having a Zoom participation component with that meeting. So I've got some correspondence back and forth with our IT consultant as to whether or not we'll be able to do that. I just don't know yet. But at minimum, what we would like to be able to do is have it be a joint meeting. That was the request of the Board of Selectmen. So you need to have at least if we can't have it by a hybrid Zoom and in person, we'd need to have at least a quorum appear at the Board of Selectmen meeting to have a joint meeting.
I think that might be difficult now.
It could be.
Right.
That's why I wanted to get it up to you today.
And what exactly are we supposed to be, me being new at this, and I'm assuming I'm supposed to
Yeah.
say something, which I have no idea of what.
So
Guidance.
we're
would be-
going to provide to the board on Tuesday night, among other things, a financial review of golf and how that performed. But mostly what they were interested in was a financial review of the year that was just closed. And then what the prospects are for the year up ahead. And part of that discussion would be, what's proposed on the warrant is to what degree is anybody comfortable using free cash this early to finance some of the things that we're requesting to be financed. And I think, with about $5.4 million in free cash, there's a sense that, we should preserve a large chunk of that for the Springtown meeting for sure. But I think the chairman's position here was he wanted to get some feedback from the finance committee as, I think probably one of the more controversial items is, do we use 1.1 million of free cash to finance the road projects? Where our pavement index is already above the 70 that was kind of targeted for, or should we maybe use half of that number and then that preserves more free cash? So it's more a matter of getting all the people in the room that want to make those recommendations.
So it's more of they're presenting to us than anything.
Well, I think they want to be able to bounce a few ideas off you, like what's your opinion on using $1.1 million of free cash for road improvements? If you think we should.
Have we really even talked a tremendous amount about that as a committee? I mean, are we capable of even, are we going to show up there and we're all going to have different opinions? And this?
Well, you might. I mean, so that's kind of why I wanted to get the warrant in your hands ahead of time. But, one of the things to think about is he's got 5.4 million in free cash. Now, some of that, a good chunk of that money was money carried over from last year's free cash appropriation. So how much would you be comfortable spending over the winter? And obviously the capital ask that we're asking for, where we put those in front of you, because as administration and as the departments, we feel that those need to get funded. But that might be like $400,000. Beyond that is the road money at 1.1 million. I mean, I think it would be helpful for the board to hear what your opinions are. We've tried really hard from an administrative point of view and with finance department to try to squeeze as much free cash as possible. So you have these opportunities to weigh in on these topics without straining the overall budget or financial situation of the town.
And what's the typical free cash position we'd normally have, and how much are we comfortable going? I mean, I would think we'd want it all to stay.
Well, it's been between like $2 and $3.5 million over the years. I mean, I think one of the screens that we'll share with you on Tuesday is what the history's been. And that'll kind of give you an idea. Now, like I said, we didn't use about 2.6 million from last year. So that carried over in that account.
Good.
But there are things that we actually have to pay for, as you saw tonight and heard tonight. One of the things that's out there that has really grown, it started at a $60,000 estimate. Now it's up to $280,000. The design work for that HVAC system. Now that's been a problem since the day I arrived in town. The departments were talking about problems with that. We're just at a critical point now. So I mean, that clearly has to get addressed, or there will be no air conditioning for the police department next year. That's pretty much the bottom line. How we finance that for construction, that's a different conversation.
Where does the $3 million that's going to need to be?
Well, that's a really good question, Brian. That's got to be talked about over the winter as to what's the financing mechanism for that. Now, whatever it is that's decided will have to be put in front of town meeting in the spring.
It could be a bond of some sort potentially.
I don't think you're going to want to spend $3 million of free cash on fixing it.
Right. Well, not when you only have 5.4.
That's correct.
I mean, it just seems that going in front of this, the Board of Selectmen, we're going in blind. We haven't really had a chance to there's a new chairman, me. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. And I'm glad to do it, but I don't want to walk in there and look like a fool either.
No, understood. I
Nor do
mean,
I necessarily want to walk in there, period.
I think it's up to the board, the finance committee to decide if they want to participate or not.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think Dan, what Brian's saying is, we want to be adequately prepared. It's not a question of whether or not we want to engage. I'll speak for myself. It's not a question of whether or not I want to engage. It's that I want to make sure that I'm prepared going in. I feel a little frustrated, that the first time that we're seeing the draft warrant articles and having this conversation is right now, when we're meeting with them in 5-6 days. So, I think that, we could use in this, whatever time we have remaining, a little bit of, guidance about some of the things that we should be looking at. I don't know if Ed has any thoughts on that. But
we just put together a package that will recap fiscal year 2020, as well as give an outlook or give you a first quarter look at where we are with revenues. We had one surprise number that was great news that offset some expected news. So I think maybe that package, when that's available to be sent out, once Dan has a review of that, we can get that to you, and you can fire off as many questions between now and Tuesday as you would like to, via email or phone call or whatever is appropriate. And that may give you just a basis of where we've been over history, where we are versus other Cape Cod communities, what it looks like for our bond rating, what the influences are for the bond rating. So all of those types of things are in the fiscal year end report. We don't normally delve into what the first quarter might have looked like. Normally we have this ahead of the first quarter, but we felt that you don't really know anything in terms of revenues until the first quarter is over. So I think that gives you a better picture of where we are financially in order for you to take a look at perhaps some of the advice that you might give to the Board of Selectmen.
So Ed, we'll have like receipts, the rooms, the room occupancy for short-term rentals. We'll have meals, all that sort of stuff, that data for the first quarter.
Yeah, that's all in the package at this point in time. We'll also have a list of all of the funding sources that are available, both articles that have been passed, all of the different funds that are available to each one of the departments. So, there's, a picture of where we are currently. And then, again, based on some surprise news, and this is the first time we've ever had an ability to break out the short-term rental tax from the meals tax. That wasn't done all of last year. They didn't have that capability in place, but the Cape Towns and others pushed for that, and they were able to deliver that. So you're going to be able to see that. And in the analysis, there's also the splitting out of the short-term rentals and what the impact is if you take away the short-term rentals, because that was seen to be part of the pre-funding and the ongoing funding for the wastewater projects. So those numbers really should be discounted, I think, as you're looking at what the spending might be for FY22 and for November as well. So I think there are some looks at the current revenues. It's 4 months of revenues for short-term and hotel motel instead of 3. So prorating the 4 to 3 to make sure people are looking at it on that basis, and then discounting the hotel, the short-term rental tax, so that hey, that's already earmarked for something else. You can't use, it's proposed to be earmarked for something else. You all haven't weighed in on that. The Board of Selectmen haven't done their wastewater financing policy at this point in time. So it's up in the air as to how that would be used, but that has been a funding source we've looked at for a number of years as a way to handle our wastewater needs.
Yeah, I think as it should be, it's being looked at as 100% should go to wastewater.
That's been the discussion, but you guys get to weigh in, obviously, and so does the Board of Selectmen. But that was one of the many different sources of funding that we've been looking at for years in order to meet the needs of the wastewater project.
So I guess the other question I think that it would be helpful to have information about is historically when we've had recessions, 2008, what have you, and the legislature has cut local aid, what percentage have they cut it by? What has that meant for cuts for Yarmouth?
It was funny because when Dan, prior to Dan coming on board, he said, hey, so, what's your local aid? The legislators are looking to cut your local aid. We don't get very much local aid. So it's like, in terms of what we have for local aid, there isn't very much. When you look at the schools, yes, they get a lot of local aid. But sure, if that's something that you want to have in a set of slides or maybe done outside of the presentation, because I know Mary Alice needs to put together the package for the Board of Selectmen to get that out, but I can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think looking at the Chapter 90, the Chapter 70, the local aid is going to be important. And if we could compare it with what the percentage dip in state revenues was at that point in time, compared with what the latest figures coming out of the state, the House and Senate Ways and Means had a joint hearing with A&F the other day. And I think that they're rounding out to around $3.9 billion hole. Yeah. So in terms of a percentage of the budget and what that turns into as a percentage of, cuts to various pockets of local aid, I think that would help us in understanding what we have to look forward to in cuts, which I am assuming that we're going to have to face. And that would be important to know.
When we built the FY 2021 budget, the assumption was a 20% reduction in local aid. The assumption was also a 34% reduction in local receipts. So those have already been factored into the FY 21 budget. Again, first quarter so far, if you take out the rooms tax, we're at 90% of where we were last year. And that was a higher year than what it was in 2019. And we've been using 2019 as the benchmark because 2020, the revenues tailed off because of COVID. But, that was part of Dan and Rich Bienvenu and, my discussions as it related to actually building the budget to be conservative. Again, the revenues for motor vehicle was, at 70%. The revenues for meals was at 70%. Everything else was trending towards what we had anticipated, except for the motel and short-term rentals. That was a blockbuster number higher than expected. So that offset a lot of the declines. Now, this is just first quarter. Motor vehicle excise tax, the first and largest billing doesn't happen until February. So we don't really know what that number's going to be. And that could offset some of what happened with the hotel motel. But again, it's looking like it's going to be better than 30%. And the local aid hasn't been cut yet in terms of what the state has been giving to us. They may do that later. But again, we've built in the fact that we would have a local aid cut. So we've been conservative. We took a lot of advice from our rating call with S&P. That was last March. We're positioning ourselves for the rating call that will happen in possibly a few months because of DPW garage. So I think we're going to be in very good shape for that. And, if, hopefully we're not going to get a huge downside, below 30% on the motor vehicle excise. And we can end the year well above the 33% cut that we built into the FY21 budget.
Yeah, just to let you know, the governor released his budget today, his proposal, and they're not, it's the same as it was in July. There's no cuts. Actually, chapter 70 goes up by 107 million. And unrestricted local aid goes the same as fiscal 2020. So they're going to find different ways to cover that $3.6 billion gap.
That's great news.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Thank you.
so that, that I don't believe will be an issue for FY '21.
Yeah.
It's going to be,
We don't have a lot of local aid, to Ed's point. Some communities have millions of dollars of local aid, and we just don't have that.
not a major impact for Yarmouth.
So can we start to think about Tuesday? And Robert had left it. I don't know if anybody read Robert had put a note in the comment section, the chat section, about not having enough time to vote or make any decisions with any confidence about the right long-term decisions. And I kind of want to echo that for myself personally. I think the, prior chairs, specifically Ken and, even Joe, they had formulated opinions and, kind of some pretty strong opinions on certain things. I myself am in the process of really formulating what I think of my opinion should be. And I think maybe there's a couple other members on this committee that feel the same way. I'm just not fully confident that, I don't know if 1.1 million bucks for roads is the right thing or the wrong thing. And I quite honestly don't know where we would come up with that money because we haven't really talked about it. So those type of things, I think if we get into that meeting and they ask us those questions, I can't speak with any kind of educated vernacular. And I don't think, I'm not sure anybody else has an opinion on that as well. So that would be my concern, is we're going to go there and not really have any answers to questions that are posed to us.
I echo Brian on this. I'm concerned because of exactly the same reasons, and on top of us not exactly knowing what it is that they want us to talk about. We haven't vetted it as a committee, talked about it, anything like this. And I frankly, I feel like if we had some idea of the topics they wanted to discuss with us in a little bit more detail, that we could have used our time tonight to vet that. And I don't think that I don't think we have any business going into a joint meeting next week when we don't have any kind of an opinion, whether it be divided or a consensus, to be presenting on topics to the select board.
I agree.
I concur. Not only do we not know what they specifically want to talk about, Sarah's point, but we lack the information upon which to form our own opinion. We've not received that yet. How can we even assess what we think the town looks like financially, and where we would propose to remedy that or whatever? So, I agree. We don't have the information, and we don't know what we're supposed to opine on. So we'd be wasting their time and ours.
Yeah, Dan, my understanding from you was that the intention was that we would both hear the numbers at the same time.
That's how it was explained. They wanted the numbers at the same time. Yep.
So that's different from, what do you guys think about this? So
I think it's one and the same, because the budget instructions were pushed off until the numbers came in, and the numbers just came in. And that's what we've been working this week to get them in a format to make it comprehensible. But the idea that they're somehow, multilateral conversations, I think it just becomes a matter of, how much money do you feel comfortable committing to at the fall? I mean, there's a certain amount that I'm going to recommend that we would have to take care of business. But beyond that, everything is, it's a matter of personal preference that I think they just kind of, at least the chairman wanted to check your temperature with. For instance, with roads, I mean, some would say that, we're already above 70 on the index. Why would we want to spend any more money on the roads until next spring? That's fine. That saves you $1.1 million.
That is exactly my point, Dan. Yeah. I mean, I have no idea whether or not we really should be spending $1.1 million on roads, because I'm not qualified to to have an understanding of that. I mean, I think those type of things. But if this is kind of a meeting where we're just going to start to find out some details and they want to learn the details with us at the same time, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But for us to have any kind of semblance of decisions made going into that meeting, I think I just don't think it's feasible.
Right. Like I said, it's your call what you want to do.
And if we're there in a learning capacity, that's one thing. If we're there in an advisory capacity, I think the committee has spoken that we're not comfortable with that.
I 100% agree with that. So, if the feeling on the committee is we want to go in there only with the assumption it's a learning experience to find out the information they're finding out, then I don't know how we're going to work it logistically, because I know there's members that don't want to go in, myself included. But I have no problem with that. And I think that seems to be the opinion of the committee.
Did you relate to them that we're only there for learning and not for advisory?
That was to you, Dan.
Oh, I didn't hear that. No, that's fine. I mean, if you want to just tune in from home, that's totally understandable. I get it. I mean, obviously, the way timing goes, if you're going to meet again next Wednesday, you'll have that information on Tuesday night. Well, you'll end up getting it before the weekend to review it. But by Tuesday, you'll see it live. And then Wednesday, if you wanted to talk about it, get a recommendation. They won't meet again after the 20th of October until the 10th of November, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, because the 3rd is the election. There's no meeting on the 3rd.
So perhaps the idea is that we just kind of, if they can get Zoom working, we Zoom in and just kind of listen to the details and find out the information.
Yeah, just watch it on
That's the best
TV.
we can offer.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a problem with us asking questions, again, if it's informational.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely.
But Dan, I mean, I think how I'm feeling right now is I don't feel prepared. And so I think, what we need to do as a committee, and what I think would be really helpful, from either yourself or Andrea or Ed, would be between now and town meeting, probably sooner rather than later. We need to hear from you. What are these questions that we should be asking? What are the pros and cons of each side? So if you say that the index for roads is whatever, what's the counter to that? What does Jeff say to that? And what are the benchmarks that we need to be looking at, as far as, what to be putting aside and saving for potentially what is a really significantly rainy day? And what are also the drawbacks? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think I remember Jeff saying that doing the roads now was going to be cheaper, right? And if they need to get done overall, but I just don't have enough information on that. And I feel like making sure that we have a clear sense of what all of the factors are and the pros and cons is really going to be important for us to be doing our jobs, providing fiscal advisory opinions on this.
So there's no right answer for any of those questions. It's more a matter of form over substance. So for instance, there'll be some that are so principled, they'll say that there was an override some years ago of $1.1 million, and no matter what, come hell or high water, $1.1 million should be spent on the roads every year. There'll be some that would say, well, the roads are above 70, you can let a year slip by, no big deal. It really comes down to a matter of, as an individual, to what degree can you live between 0 and 1.1 million? Personally, if you were asking me, I'd split the difference. I'm always kind of like a half a loaf person to begin with, based on the numbers that came to us last week on the rentals. That makes me feel a little bit better about spending money on roads, because if we didn't have good numbers, I would tell you don't spend any money this year on the roads, because the projections are way off. But because they came in strong, I feel better that there'll be enough money in the springtime to be able to attend to business. And then you'll have more information on receipts back in the spring by the Springtown meeting. So there, like I said, on many of these issues, there's no right or wrong answer. It's more a matter of based on the information that you have, and we know more today than we knew 3 days ago for sure, as it relates to the financial situation with the town. What are you comfortable with as an individual? So I mean, at this point, based on what I'm hearing from you tonight, I'd say sit back and listen to Tuesday's meeting. If we can get Zoom up and running and you want to participate and ask some questions live time, we'll see if we can get that done. And then you're going to be able to meet again on Wednesday after you know all that information anyhow, and you can come up with a recommendation to give to the board for their next meeting on November 10th. We just have to have recommendations for town meeting before the 17th of November.
So as someone who's new, maybe this is just how things are done, but this feels very informal. This feels very ad hoc. It feels very kind of cavalier, to be honest. And just sort of, what we feel like that's not a good.
Well, Stephanie, I would say to you on this one is that none of us know what the future is right now. This is not a normal process or procedure. For those that have been around, the spring town meeting is a much more diligent. We have much more information to share with you. Our confidence interval is much higher for Springtown meeting. This is something literally, like I said, as recent as today, I come into the office. I've got a generator at Town Hall that's not working. It needs repair. I got Jeff's estimate goes from $80,000 to $280,000 in a week's time. I mean, this whole thing, if you're feeling like this is rushed, we're trying to make this all work to hit the November 17th deadline. And we just got information on the first quarter late last week. So it's not at all the way I would normally like to go about things. But the problem is that if you're looking at like, how much of the picture do you see right now? I might only see like 30% of it. It's not a good confidence interval for me. That's why I'm saying we're only putting in front of you those things that we think we definitely need to have spend money on, and then be really conservative until you get to that higher level of confidence in the spring. That's all.
Hey, let me speak to Stephanie's point. I agree. And Steph and I are the newbies here, so we both have a sense of we don't appreciate the context. Dan, I understand that we're about making business decisions here, quote unquote. You're never going to have all the information, so you got to just take what you got and make a decision. This is not science.
Well, this is even worse than that, George, I would argue, because we know so little of the future.
I agree, but I'm just saying we have no context. I'm speaking for myself, and I think that's the point that Stephanie's been trying to make. As newbies, this is, I've been here a year now, and I still have the sense of, I don't know what the hell's going on. And, I feel embarrassed that I'm asked to vote on issues that just, I feel I'm lacking sufficient information on which to make even the simplest decision.
Well, so George, we went through the entire budget process last year under a normal steady state, right? And then literally
I agree with
March 16th, it crashed, and we came back to you in a quick fashion and said, look at 33% cut on local receipts, 25% cut on local aid. We're making this up to a large extent, George. You think,
I agree.
I hear you. This is all uncharted terrain for us too,
Remember, I'm the one who's been insisting that I'm not even getting information. So all of this is just sort of somebody says something in a meeting and I don't have any documentary evidence to show me what's going on. I have nothing to hang my hat on. I just know that,
let me ask you, what specifically is it that you're looking for? Because we've tried to give you as much information as it gets generated to us as we can in advance.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm getting nothing, zero.
What do you mean nothing?
Are you not getting emails?
No, the only thing I'm getting is what Andrea sent to, is it Andrea? Sent, but there was some monthly package that
There's
for whatever reason, I don't get.
Those are the trending reports that get automatically generated out of financing. Out of the finance department. I'm not sure why you're not getting those, because everybody.
But I keep saying I'm not getting them and nothing gets done about it.
George, I'll forward you the latest month's trending report.
George, I'll take care of it.
All right,
I
good.
think we should listen on
Can somebody-
Tuesday and discuss
somebody
it on
send me-
Wednesday.
Can somebody send me the
Right, Jack.
emails for everybody on the finance committee? And
I
I'll
will.
take care of making sure that everybody gets the revenue trending reports each month.
I'll send you the email list, Ed.
Thank
Great,
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I think Jack's got a great idea. We'll listen on Tuesday and have a at least informed conversation on Wednesday.
Before we end, I kind of would like to just, not to beat a dead horse, but I think everyone has valid points. I've been here, I think, 2 years, and I still feel like half the time I don't know what the heck is going on. So George, if you've only been here 1 year, I've been here twice as long as you, and I feel I'm more clueless than you are, and apparently I'm the chair. I think we're missing, when I started on the committee, there were other members, and I think Jack is someone who could probably have a lot of insight into how the board runs and how precedent took place, of which I have no idea of any of that stuff. And again, I'm learning as we go, and I don't have any problem doing that. And, it could get a little bit messy, but I think the COVID issue and having Zoom calls really screwed things up. It's just not easy to do things this way. It's harder when you're not in person, and people might not want to ask the questions. You don't know how to ask things. So I think we just have to, work through this, but there is some incoherence on the board right now. And I think we just need to work through it and all learn from it, and learn as we go. Unfortunately, that's how I see it. And with that, perhaps we can think about adjourning, because it is getting kind of late.
I think that's a good idea. I'll move we adjourn.
I'm gonna
I'll
second
second
that.
Well, that was a spirited discussion. It's nice to see. So we'll all watch the meeting on Tuesday, and then hopefully have questions on Wednesday. Dan, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, so when the packet gets sent to you, probably go out tomorrow, take a look at that material. If there's questions in advance that you have, send us questions that you have, and we'll get them as part of the answers in the presentation on Tuesday night. Okay?
Okay. I think we're adjourned.
Yes.
Good night,
I think
everyone.
you need a vote.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about, well, it's 8 o'clock. It's past my bedtime.
Unanimous.
Just need a roll call.
All right, ready? Those that are left is Jack,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Stephanie,
Aye.
myself is I as well, and